Greetings, everybody, and thank you for making time to join us at the Women in Transport Africa Conference organized by Flone Initiative. My name is Naomi Mwaura. I'm currently the Executive Director of Flone Initiative, and I'm so honored to be leading the session on Goal 7, Integrated Mobility and Affordable and Clean Energy. I'm even more excited to have on board amazing women in the panel, and let me introduce you to the panelists. First up, we have Lucy Kihonge, who will be launching a report conducted by Flone Initiative in partnership with UNEP. And the report title is Leveraging Gender to Increase Uptake of Electric Mobility. Next, I will be presenting some early findings of a Flone Initiative in partnership with UN Habitat Research that is part of a wider intervention that will provide technical advice on gender mainstreaming to e-mobility companies in Rwanda. Next up, we'll have Dorah Mwenye from Zimbabwe, Selma Beach presenting her research on tailwind. This session falls on the second day of the conference under the research track of the conference, focusing on recognizing the significance and value of ensuring that policy and interventions are informed by research. Ladies and gentlemen, I hope you have your notebooks and pens ready to learn and jot down the incredible work that our panelists have done. Lucy, you have the floor. You can now start your presentation.
Hey everybody, my name is Lucy Kihonge. I'm the Programs Officer at Flone Initiative. I have a background in gender and development studies, and I have special interest in gender inclusion, equity, and with a special focus in policy advocacy and human rights. So for the couple of years, I've been working in women-led organization, and I'm so excited to be here engaging people from all over the world as we present our report that has taken us over 10 months to develop in collaboration with UN Habitat. I'm so excited that we are launching it today, and I'm looking forward to your feedback, to your recommendation, to your input. And if you have any questions for me, kindly feel free to type on the chat box. I'll be able to respond at the end of the presentation. So the report title is on leveraging gender uptake in the e-mobility space. And it's broken down into different sections. Number one, it has a background. Number two, it has a methodology. Number three, it has data collection tools. Number four, it has key findings. And number five, it has recommendation to the key stakeholders. Kindly allow me take you through the presentation. So as you all know, women continue to be underrepresented in the transport sector. And when it comes to e-mobility, for example, about 270 million motorcycles are bought by people in the world each and every year. About 52 million are on the road each and every day. And when it comes to motorcycles, you all know the impact that they have in contributing towards increased levels of greenhouse emissions, and also each and every the state and the state non-state actors are working towards they're advocating for adoption of clean and green energy. That's something that we are looking forward to having in the coming future. Let's narrow down to Kenya, where according to the Kenya National Bureau of Statistics census in 2019, about 24.3% of Kenyan households own a bicycle or a motorcycle. About 2.3% own either a tuk-tuk, and also 5.5% own either a tuk-tuk or a private vehicle. So in this regard, where do we place men and women in regard to ownership, access, and control? Number one, men are more likely to own and control assets in the household. In this regard, they have access to motor vehicles, and they have the right, and I would say the right to drive compared to women. In regard to this has placed men at the highest level in regard to access and control over decision-making in the immobility space, access and control over socioeconomic aspects compared to women, because their mobility is constrained and they have no otherwise, but basically they remain in the private sphere. So the study had 3 objectives. And number 1 was to establish gender dimension in the 2- and 3-wheeler mobility in Kenya. Number 1, to identify gaps and opportunities that will promote the uptake of e-mobility. And number 3 was to identify policy gaps in the uptake of electric mobility in Kenya. So where do we place gender in the e-mobility space in Kenya? As I had mentioned, the study was only carried out in Kenya, and basically in 3 major cities, Nairobi, Kisumu, and Mombasa. So despite the growth of 2- and 3-wheelers in Kenya, women continue to be underrepresented and integrated in the transport sector, which exposes them to socioeconomic disadvantages and poverty. This was according to a report that was published in 2013 by African Development Bank. So the study brought together 478 males and 60 female drivers, and also brought together 646 female commuters. It also employed both qualitative and quantitative methods, whereby we had semi-structured questionnaire, and the questionnaire was structured in 4 sections, and section 1 basically collected riders and demographic data. Section 2 collected data on opportunities and challenges on gender inclusion. Section 3 collected data on the uptake of e-mobility. And then section 4 examined the gaps in the existing policies. So we also, the methodology also focused heavily on the current challenges, gaps for gender inclusion, how to integrate women in the uptake of e-mobility, and also focused on the policy gaps and opportunities that will enable state and non-state actors to effectively and efficiently adopt e-mobility in Kenya. So the study was only limited to 3 counties in Kenya, Nairobi, Kisumu, and Mombasa. And the question was, does this represent the actual state of e-mobility uptake among women and underrepresented groups? In this regard, I'm considering the 2- and 3-wheeler motor vehicles. So in Kenya, I would say most of the cities have almost similar demographics, and hence the recommendations and the findings can easily be replicated to other regions. However, there is supposed to be a keen focus on the rural areas, because we can't compare, for example, roads in the rural areas to roads in the urban areas. So there is a gap there, but that can be addressed after we have implemented the recommendation and we have internalized the findings in this report. So the policy, the document also interrogated different legal frameworks, and some of them were regional and international frameworks. For example, we have the United Declaration on Human Rights, the Convention on the Elimination of All Forms of Discrimination Against Women, CEDAW, and these are documents that has guidelines and procedures on how to ensure that women, girls, people living with disability are not left out in any development processes. The frameworks are adopted in Kenya. They were ratified by the Kenyan government. And so the government still remains guided. The state and non-state actors remain guided by the documents and the treaties and the conventions, but we still feel there is much that needs to be done, despite the fact that government having had ratified, there's little that has happened on the ground in regard to inclusion of women, another marginalized group in the e-mobility space. So there are other legal frameworks at the local level. One of them is the Kenyan Constitution that has, for example, acts and clauses that basically highlight on the the need and for everybody to be treated equally, everybody to be involved in any development processes, and respect for people's rights, respect, protecting women, girls, everybody in the country against discrimination, against sexual and gender-based violence. Also, we have the National Policy on Gender and Development that provides guidelines on how to implement gender, to mainstream gender in different aspects and ensure that all programs and projects that are run in all the socioeconomic sectors are gender sensitive. And then we have the Education and Gender Policy that basically highlights on the need to have women, girls, people living with disability, the refugees being integrated in the education system so that they can be able to take up opportunities. And in this regard, under the Education and Gender Policy, we have the affirmative action that highlights and put guidelines on how to have more women take up opportunities in STEM subjects, science, technology, engineering, and mathematics, so that they can be able to venture into technical courses, they can be able to venture into, for example, careers regarding transport planning, urban planning, engineering. So those are the policies that were interrogated, and they are well elaborated in the report. So there are specific policies in the immobility space in Kenya, and we have the National Environment Policy that basically highlights on the guidelines and the framework that should be followed to ensure that we have clean energy. And number two, we have the energy policy that provides a provision that the government and any other energy regulatory company should lower or provide subsidies to ensure there is people adopt green energy, people adopt renewable energy, so that we can get rid of fuel that contribute to greenhouse emissions. And then we have the Integrated National Transport Policy that basically provide guidelines on planning, inclusion. We have social mobility. We have basically having everybody in the planning and implementation of transport-based policies in regard to having people with disabilities coming on board, the refugees, the women, the girls, so that we have an inclusive public transport system. So let me take you straight to the findings of the report. And number one was the distribution of 2- and 3-wheeler riders. And as you can see from the graph here, in Nairobi, 88% of the respondents were men, only 12 were female, 98 were men in Mombasa, and only 10% were women. 89% were men in Kisumu, while only 11% were female. So as you can see, 89% of riders in the 2- and 3-wheelers in Kenya, like in the 3 cities, 89% are men and 11% are female. So you can see the gender gap, you can see the underrepresentation, and this brought us to other findings in the end, and also specific recommendations in regard to this. Also, when it came to distribution of respondents by age, majority of the respondents were aged between 25 to 39. And as you can see, it is the age that people are more productive, people are having childcare duties, people are engaging in career growth, and also women, for example, women are more into care work, they are in a productive age, and so we expect most of the activities will be, like most of the transport activities will be towards childcare, taking children to school, coming back home, going to the market, and something like that. So there was also gender comparison in riders' level of education. And as you can see, majority of the respondents had secondary school qualification at 48%, which were men, and at 32% females. And as you can see, as the level of education went higher, the more the numbers went down. For example, at the postgraduate level, there were no men who had a postgraduate degree, but we had only 2% of women. And also at the degree level, we have 1% of men and 7% of women. Also at the diploma, we had 9% of men and 8% of women. Also at the certificate, we had 11%. So you can see the gender dynamics in the access to education and the highest qualification each respondent had. And as you can see, at the primary and secondary level, men have education KCSE or lower than that, but we can say from these findings is that most of the respondents have KCSE levels of qualification. So the study also sought to establish where women were specializing in between the two-wheelers and the three-wheelers. So from the graph, from the pie chart, you can see 72% were specializing in two-wheeler. These are the boda-bodas and the bicycles. And only 28% were specializing in three-wheelers. These are the tuk-tuks or the rickshaws. So we also sought to establish the types of abuse that female riders were facing in their line of duty. And as you can see, the highest percentage and in both Kisumu, Nairobi, and Mombasa attributed verbal harassment, followed by physical, followed by being requested for sexual favors, and then physical harassment, followed by indecent gestures, and then other aspects, for example, rape, for example, indecent, like for example, groping came in at 1.5 and 1.2. It was exciting to see that people in Kisumu, people in Mombasa didn't experience any other forms of harassment apart from indecent gestures, being asked for sexual favors, verbal harassment, and physical harassment. So we also thought to establish what the need of using the two and three-wheeler among the female commuters. Like we were asking questions to the female commuters: where are you going? What are you doing? From here, where are you going? And what activities are you going to engage in? And at the highest percentage of about 79%, 73%, and 66%, majority of the female commuters were going to work. And then followed by shopping at 14%, 7.1%, 4.3%, and others came in, followed in that order. But from the look of things, we can see women would use public transport, and in this regard, two and three-wheelers to go to work, either go for shopping, accompany children from school to home, others visiting friends, and also women going to school by themselves. So we also sought to establish the role of women, the different positions that they held in the transport sector, that is in the two and three-wheeler sector. And at the highest percentage, women were being engaged as sales and marketing personnel, and only 45% were riders. And at the lowest percentage of 3% were stage attendants. But you can see women are taking more opportunities. Women are pursuing careers in sales and marketing in regard to two and three-wheelers, compared to taking roles in the riding, for example, office admin. And we can relate this to power relations and power dynamics. For example, at the level of the office admin, we have only 5% of women taking up opportunities. So this means major decision-making processes in such a setting will basically be done by men. And also, as you can see, in the investor section, we only have 23%. So you can relate between leadership, and then previously we presented about access and ownership of the locomotives. You can relate to that. And then we sought to establish on the awareness of immobility, and driven either trying to find out if the women had for example, drove or ridden a locomotive. And to our shock, 92% in Kisumu, 94% and 96% said no, they had not ridden or seen an e-mobility locomotive. So you can imagine trying to implement a project on e-mobility, and yet 92% of the population do not know, they have not seen it, and they have not had an experience in riding. And you can see about 7.1, 5.8, 3.7 in Nairobi, Mombasa, and Kisumu consecutively, they had interacted with an e-mobility locomotive, I would say. But this posed a huge question on how we can, for example, speak about e-mobility and start implementing the projects. And yes, people are not aware of such locomotives. And then as we narrow down to region-specific awareness, we sought to establish if either the riders, the commuters, and the people seeking the transport, the 2- and 3-wheeler services, they were aware of e-mobility. And as you can see, 63% male riders, they were aware. And also 36% they were aware, and also 48% were aware, that's for men, and then 37, 64, and 52% were not aware. Also, awareness on e-mobility in regions, you can see 78% of men in Nairobi, and also you can see the statistics show like there is low awareness on their e-mobility and what it comes with, and how basically to run such locomotives, and the advantages and disadvantages of them. And then we also sought to establish factors influencing e-mobility uptake. And number one, we spoke to riders, we spoke to commuters, and we also spoke to people providing services in the, for the 2- and 3-wheeler locomotives. And from the findings, you can see the environmental friendliness accounted to 64% of male riders and 39.90% of female riders. On the commuter side, 65.4% attributed it to being environmental friendly, 11.30% to being renewable, and only 6.80% to being economical. And also we have 57%, 39% also of the people providing services to their 2- and 3-wheeler locomotives, attributing it to either being environmental friendly, renewable, or economical. And then we sought also to establish the attributes, what they considered while acquiring electric mobility locomotives, the 2- and 3-wheelers. And from the statistic, you can see the highest percentage attributed it to performance, and followed by purchasing price, also fuel consumption, and then we have the capacity of the passengers, the durability, and also availability of the spare part. So you can see people are more scared. For example, if this tuk-tuk or this motorcycle have a puncture, where do I get the spare parts? Who do I approach to repair my locomotives? So that was noted, and also they only considered performance because they said it was quick, it was not emitting gases, it was somehow silent. So they would go for such a locomotive based on that. And then we sought to establish the gender's perspective on proposed policy priorities. So we asked them, what can we do to increase the uptake of e-mobility among women in Kenya? And that is in Nairobi, Kisumu, and Mombasa. Number one was to increase the size of the rider seat, such that women have more space. For example, when they are carrying their kids, when they are traveling from the market to home, they can have more space that can accommodate their luggage and their kids. Also, at 28%, they said we should ensure there are no noisy, like internal combustion vehicles. For example, women said they are more scared, or they don't feel comfortable when the locomotives, or for example, the tuk-tuk is so noisy. So if we can have a locomotive that's less noisy, that doesn't emit a lot of gases, they'll definitely vote for it. And then at 18.4% proposed that we ensure there's spacing for passengers in case for a tuk-tuk. For example, here in Nairobi, in Mombasa, I would say, through experience, there is a lot of congestion inside the tuk-tuk. For example, the tuk-tuk is supposed, for example, to ferry 3 people. And you see inside that tuk-tuk, you'll find 5 people. And for a woman with children, for a woman with luggage, that's not comfortable for them. And if they need comfortability, then means they have to dig deep into their pockets to pay for that extra seat. And at 21%, the space in Korea, they needed larger locomotives. For example, the e-bikes, the tuk-tuk, they should be larger so that they can have more space to accommodate them, their luggage and children. And also, for example, if they're taking care of the elderly people, they can take care, they can be able to move around efficiently. So we also sought to find out barriers to effective adoption of immobility. Number one, the battery replacement. They highlighted that there were no spaces where they could replace their batteries. And number two, there are a few number of models. For example, while piloting, not all of them had gone through the piloting process. There were not enough locomotives, and they felt they needed more awareness. They needed more locomotives so that they can be able to know how to ride, how to operate, how to do basic mechanics in case there's wear and tear. And then they were also not aware of time taken to charge the batteries, because, for example, you are ferrying a passenger and then the battery dies. So how long will it take for you to charge it to a full capacity? And then we have distance to travel for one full charge. The government or the social enterprises haven't provided guidelines or haven't provided like a comprehensive answer on how long a battery should last so that people can plan themselves in advance. And then there's also lack of awareness at 26%. People feel the enterprises implementing this project, they have not reached out to different groups of people, they haven't engaged them. And so there's need also for that. And then there's an availability of charging stations. For example, in Kenya, not every corner you can find connection, electric connection. Not everywhere you can find a petrol station. Not everywhere you can find a place where you can charge your phone or your locomotive. So that again was another challenge that needed to be addressed. And also the initial cost. Like, for example, they were supposed one for example, motorcycle goes for over 100,000 and more. So you can imagine you don't have any other source of income, you cannot access credit, but you are supposed to buy that locomotive one-off. So that again was another challenge that needed to be addressed. So we also sought to establish the policy gaps in the implementation of immobility. And number one, there was a lack of enforcement of law on sexual abuse, harassment of women and girls in transport. And also number two, there was an availability of charging stations. For example, there were no guidelines on how long the battery will last, where do you get replacement, how to measure, how to assess an original and a fake spare part. So there are no guidelines into that. And also high cost of purchasing the locomotives, as I've said. And lastly, lack of policy frameworks to phase out the crude oil products. For example, you tell people, we want you to adopt immobility locomotives, but you are not telling them where they should take the fuel locomotives and how you're going to compensate them. So that is something that was highlighted and needed to be addressed. So, and then we have other adoption factors that were put into consideration. For example, availability of charging points, accessibility to charging points, affordability in terms of cost, and then availability of spare parts and maintenance equipment. You can see all that, those are specific factors that people would consider if they are to adopt or if they are to buy a locomotive, a 2 or 3 immobility locomotive. And then there were general recommendations that are deeply discussed in the report. And number 1 was to enhance access and improve affordability of the e-bikes. Number 2 was to address gender stereotypes in 2- and 3-wheeler sectors. And then number 3 was the affirmative action, for example, in the education sector, to ensure more women take up opportunities in the STEM-based subjects, so that they can women take up courses in the STEM-based subjects so that they can take up opportunities in the immobility space. And then number 3, to foster women entrepreneur and innovation, for example, support, incentivize women who are taking, for example, women who are interested in owning, women who are interested in learning how to drive this locomotive. We can foster them and also support them financially, and also enhance security and safety in the sector. For example, in Kenya, we have the legal system. I would say it's somehow not, I would say it's not, it has, for example, if you report a case of harassment, yes, you report, but it will take a long time for you to get justice. So these, again, need to be addressed. And then there's movement building, and this will ensure that we bring together state and non-state actors, discussing steer conversations around immobility, discuss on gender mainstreaming, discuss on sexual and gender-based violence in the sector, so that we can have more women take up opportunities. And then we have increasing capacity building to equip and train women and girls with skills needed to participate. For example, do mentorship for young women, do mentorship for school-going children, so that they are able to take up opportunities and embrace this sector, so that we are able, for example, to resocialize them, not see the sector as males, like to demystify and tell them this is not a men's job. Women can as well take opportunities in it. And then the last one was a specific recommendation to government and policymakers to basically ensure the policies that are in place are implemented. Also, private and public transport sector recommendation that basically provided guidelines on how to ensure that their enterprises are gender sensitive, they have frameworks, they have a customer service charter, they have policies that will ensure women who are in the sector are well represented, they are protected, their safety is ensured, and also they are able to get career advancement as they continue working in the sector. And also we have another recommendation that was made to donor and international and multilateral agencies to continue monitoring, to continue supporting enterprises that are women-centered, enterprises that are working towards gender inclusion, so that we can encourage more and more enterprises to mainstream gender in their companies. And then we have the academic institutions to provide mentorship, to provide scholarship, and also to provide specific career guides to women and the marginalized group on the uptake of immobility, and for example, the uptake of 2- and 3-wheelers, opportunities in the 2- and 3-wheelers, so that we can have that inclusive and sustainable transport system. So thank you so much for listening to me. If you have questions, I'll answer them. I'll be able to check the chat box and see your question. I'll be responding one at a go. And also you can reach out to me. My email is shown below. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Lucy, for that insightful presentation. I'm going to go next. So just give me a few minutes to just share my presentation. Yes. Sorry about that. Let me just start it from the beginning. Yes, there we are. As I mentioned earlier, I am currently the Executive Director of Flone Initiative. I have over 10 years experience managing a nonprofit. And today I'm going to present on one of our projects, or one of the subtopics in our project that where we are working with e-mobility companies, that I mean electric mobility companies to gender mainstream. In our role, we are acting as consultants providing technical support. This is a program in partnership with UN Habitat. And this is just a quick brief about myself, which I've already talked about. And as I mentioned, the overarching goal of this project is to enhance knowledge of electric mobility companies by providing technical advice on gender mainstreaming, focusing on 2- and 3-wheelers in Rwanda. I'll be presenting the early findings on an audit that informed or that aimed at identifying emerging issues and gaps and implementation challenges faced by past mobility startups and driving schools. And as I mentioned, this is part of a bigger project. So this is just the audit findings. And we were able to come up with the findings as a result of key informant interviews with executive directors and managers of e-mobility companies and also nonprofits working on e-mobility. And we divided the key informant findings into career life cycles, namely attraction. How do you get, for example, women into their companies? Selection, how do you select qualified personnel? Retention, advancement, and we also have a special feature on workplace violence and harassment. So I'm going to just dive into it. Let me start off with attraction. We found that most executive directors and managers of electric mobility companies really struggled to find graduates. And if they found graduates, there was a gap between the the other section that we divided these study findings into is the area of selection. As I mentioned, there's a lack of schools teaching the needed job descriptions. And so one of the key informant that we interviewed had already partnered with an academic institution back in Kigali, and they have experienced quite impressive success in their ability to attract and recruit qualified staff. And this we found was because they partnered with the said school to develop the curriculum. Another issue was that most of the companies lack gender balanced workforce. And in this instance, we make the recommendation of companies having an affirmative action. As you can see there, we had input from one social enterprise company who talked about, they already know that there's a gender imbalance, the number of women compared to men in their company, but they had made a pledge that this year in 2021, they are going to prioritize hiring more female candidates. On the issue of retention, when we had the key informant interviews, we found that the lack of clear promotion criteria and professional development opportunities made it harder for women to work and to decide which of what they needed to do to get a promotion, right? And so this meant that promotion was in the hands of managers, but not really based on merit. There was also the issue of poor working conditions and also working time. As my colleague Lucy has also mentioned, in the other research, we found out that most of the women in the workforce have caregiving responsibility, and the fact that their current jobs do not take into consideration this role means that eventually, especially after they become parents, and especially parents to young children, there's a lack of work-life balance. And what happens is that this pushes women out of the workforce. And this leads to the next point that we found, and we decided to call it interruptions or career interruptions. And this came this was a very important point where we were able to see that women are going through career breaks, as I mentioned before, due to caregiving responsibilities, and also when they go for maternity, and there is no assurance that they will find their job there. And then also employees, for example, are not creating good HR policies that ensure that the rest of the colleagues are not picking up workload that they find is unfair. And hence what would happen is that we found out that colleagues would probably negatively perceive people going on maternity or people getting pregnant because they know that workload will fall on them. The other issue was the issue of re-entry. So you've come back from maternity leave or from caregiving responsibility of other, for example, family members or dependents. You find that sometimes we've had a company, for example, this was last year in Addis Ababa, where they made transfers based on re-entry of women into their workforce. So these were women who were drivers in a bus company in Addis Ababa. And what they would do is that they would allow women who are drivers to take up an office desk, either while pregnant or after pregnancy. And this really promoted their intention and advancement of women in the company. So this is such a good case study that we hope that we will include in this study report. In addition, there was the issue of flexible working hours, which I've already talked about, to cater to caregiving responsibilities. And also, if you left maternity when you're a manager, you are not assured that you will come back and still be in that position. You might find that that position was already filled. And the question is, where will you find yourself? Will you find yourself maybe most likely at a lower position? There was the issue also of advancement. And there was a hope that with time after working for a certain company that you move up the ladder, but also that there is competitive packages offered to the women, and also opportunities for promotion and progression. So you find that some of the participants we've talked about or we talked to had been in their position for a couple of years and didn't know how to move to the next position. I mentioned earlier that we had a special focus on workplace harassment and violence. And one of the questions we were asking managers is what constitutes violence at the workplace? And our definition is that it's any form of negative behavior or action that relates between two or more people. It can be categorized by aggressiveness, which is sometimes repeated, and sometimes one-off, and sometimes unexpected. It can include incidences where employees are abused, threatened, assaulted, or subjected to other offensive acts or behavior related to their work or within their workplace. And this violence can both be physical or psychological, and it can range from physical attacks to verbal insults to bullying to harassment, including sexual and racial harassment. And in this instance, we divided the workplace harassment and violence into a couple of sections. We have external violence, and this is workplace violence committed by external intruders who have no relationship to the workplace. So for example, if an office is being robbed. There's also service-related violence, and this is very common in jobs where people are directly dealing with customers. There's internal violence. This is aggressive acts by current or former employees or partners of a company. And then lastly, there was organizational violence, which involves organizations putting their employees at risk. And so that is just, as I talked about, the early findings of this project. And The report will be ready in the coming months and will be available on our website. You can follow us on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and LinkedIn at Flone Initiative, where we will post about the launch and the report. In addition, as I mentioned, this is the early findings. We are still working on the report. And there is an opportunity. We are looking for peer reviewers. If you'd like to review the report and the project, you can kindly reach me at my email. Let me just go to the slide with my email. There it is, at Naomi at Flone Initiative. And this marks the end of my presentation. I look forward to answering any questions or input you might have. And once again, thank you for taking the time to be with us today. And so I will stop presenting and welcome the next speaker. And this is Dorah Mwenye. Dorah, welcome to the stage.
I'm Dorah Mwenye. I work for Immobility for Africa, and I'm going to share with you our experiences in terms of renewable energy in rural development. We are working on a project in which we have introduced a three-wheeler in rural Zimbabwe, and we are working with women, mainly because women are disadvantaged in terms of access to transport. As my background, I'm the research coordinator for Mobility for Africa, and my background, I'm an agriculturalist by background, but I've got a passion in terms of promoting rural mobility for disadvantaged groups. And I've also presented our experiences in that line in a number of fora. And in this discussion, I'll also be sharing with you our experiences. Okay, we are looking at affordable clean energy, and how are we doing it at Mobility for Africa in terms of attaining sustainable development goals. We have brought in a technology in which women don't own the tricycle, but they share costs by working in groups, and also they hire the tricycle from Mobility for Africa. And in terms of access to energy, we have created a centralized solar charging station whereby women do battery swapping. And in some cases, from our experiences, we found that the longest distance from the homesteads to the solar charging station was 25 kilometers. And in some cases, women faced challenges in terms of dead mileage. So we have also created systems where we deliver on certain days the batteries to women working in groups. And why we are saying it's affordable, because women do not own the battery, but they only pay a minimum fee for swapping, which is around $1 US. And we also have another evidence on affordable clean energy. As we are saying, the women also don't own the tricycle. They use it on a leasing basis, and they pay a monthly fee. And as they are working in groups of 3, each person pays an amount of about $5 US per month, which is quite affordable. And we are also looking at the issue of afterlife of the battery system, since we want to contribute to environmental management. We are looking at ways of using the battery as a second life after use, in terms of provision of transport for the tricycle. Probably we could use it at household level for lighting and other issues. We also have a robust monitoring and evaluation system, which includes both qualitative and quantitative methods. I will focus mostly on the qualitative. methods and our findings. Why are we saying we are integrating mobility? We are not leaving anyone behind, although it's a women-only group. Men also benefit in terms of the benefits at household level and also in terms of benefits at community level. We have built evidence on diversity of EV use, and we have built evidence in terms of how energy is integrated into agriculture, looking at horticultural production, looking at poultry production, and looking at dairy farming, where we have women in terms of agriculture production are able to reduce post-harvest losses by harvesting in time and carrying their products to the market in time. We have also integrated renewable energy into transport services, whereby communities hire the three-wheeler on a core basis. And we have a digital system that we have put in place. We also have initiated reliable and affordable transport services for service providers, including nurses, the hospitals, the clinics and hospitals, and agriculture extension workers, and the police. We have reported that their work has now been very effective and they are able to meet their targets. And above all, this intervention is improved and contributed to climate adaptation. As you know that Zimbabwe is mostly affected by droughts, and this has come in as a diversification into a non-farm related sustainable livelihood that does not depend on rain as an intervention. So we now have this as a contribution to our climate adaptation strategies. And in conclusion, I would like to highlight that access to renewable energy is a key resource for affordable and green energy towards development of the less developed communities in Africa. As we can see from the picture that I'm sharing, these are just a group of women who were discussing and also showcasing their experiences and with using the tricycle, as we normally do in our monitoring exercises. We connect with the communities in their own settings. Basically, our research is ongoing. We have produced baseline reports, and we are in the process of monitoring the activities, and we hope to share with you the impact reports in the near future. For more details, you can contact me. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Dorah, for your presentation. I am always inspired by the work you're doing, and I hope one day we can work together. And this marks the end of this session's presentation. We now welcome any questions you might have. Bye.
Okay, goodbye.
Bye.